All right, so Jordan Peterson and Christianity. It's something a lot of you have been asking about.
Yeah, he's definitely a fascinating figure.
Definitely. And to get into it today, we've got this article from a Christian website sort of analyzing his views.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I think with Peterson, there are so many opinions out there.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to know what he actually thinks.
Yeah, no, it's always tricky with these sorts of public figures.
So we're gonna try to cut through the noise today, do a deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm excited to really unpack this.
Yeah, me too. So I guess maybe to start, one thing that maybe people don't know about Peterson
Mm-hmm.
is that his mom was a Sunday school teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm curious, what do you think about that? I mean, how do you think that early exposure shaped his views on faith?
Well, I think it's interesting to consider, right? You can't deny that those early experiences probably had some kind of influence. Um, Even if he's not a traditional believer, like you said, his familiarity with Christian teachings, it's pretty apparent. Like he often talks about the value he finds in Christian ethics.
Oh yeah.
Particularly, I've noticed the concept of personal responsibility.
Yeah. I think that's a big one for him.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting because, he talks about these things that he likes.
Right.
But he's also, I think, pretty well known for being pretty critical of institutional religion.
Yeah, that's true. He definitely has some issues with the way that, organized religion plays out.
Where do you see that tension playing out, I guess?
Well, I think for him it's not so much that he's anti-faith, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more that he challenges those dogmas and those power structures that we see in organized religion.
No.
So, questioning the methods and the institutions, not necessarily the message itself, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
And you see that a lot in how he interprets biblical stories, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
He sees them less as literal events and more as metaphors, these metaphors that contain psychological truths.
So instead of viewing the story of Adam and Eve, say, as a historical event,
Right.
he's viewing it as a representation of something deeper.
Exactly. Yeah. He sees it as this allegory for the human experience, our desire for knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
the consequences that come from our choices, that struggle between order and chaos,
Right.
And that metaphorical approach, I think, is really key to understanding his philosophy as a whole.
So okay, so he's pulling out these like psychological and philosophical.
Threats.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm curious, what about just like the Bible's influence on Western culture as a whole? Like, how does he view that?
Well, Peterson, he argues that the Bible, it's kind of foundational to Western thought,
Interesting.
regardless of your personal beliefs. And he sees its influence kind of everywhere, from literature and art to law and even morality.
Yeah.
Like it's woven into the fabric of our society, whether we like consciously acknowledge it or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. So this leads us to, I think, like the big question
Uh,
everyone's wondering: is Jordan Peterson a Christian?
right.
And he's called himself a Christian atheist,
Oh, yeah.
which I don't know. It seems kind of paradoxical.
A little bit.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's definitely a head scratcher. But I think it reflects kind of this rejection of both traditional atheism
Mm-hmm.
and a literal belief in God.
Okay.
And it seems to me like he's carving out this space for himself where he can engage with Christianity,
Wow.
but on his own terms.
So it's like he's saying, okay,
Yeah.
here's what resonates with me,
Yeah,
and here's what I reject.
exactly. He's picking and choosing, but he's doing it in a thoughtful way,
Mhm.
critically.
Yeah.
He's not just blindly accepting everything
Mm.
or rejecting everything. He's actively interpreting it.
So it's more about the personal meaning that he derives from it than subscribing to, any set of doctrines.
Yeah. And for Peterson, that meaning often translates into action.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say,
He's constantly emphasizing the importance of, not just believing in something,
mm-hmm.
but actually like acting it out, living it out in your daily life.
And I feel like that focus on action
Yeah.
is a really recurring theme in his work.
Yeah, it does. It kind of connects back to that whole idea of personal responsibility, taking
Mhm.
ownership of your choices
Mhm.
and their consequences.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we've got this like really interesting mix. We've got appreciation for certain aspects of Christianity
Right.
combined with like a critical eye towards its institutions.
Yeah.
And this focus on individual interpretation and action.
It's an interesting combination for sure.
Where do you think this approach kind of fits into how people in general relate to religion today?
That's a great question. I think it speaks to a broader trend That's a great question. I think it speaks to a broader trend we're seeing where people are moving away from this idea of blind faith and towards a more personalized approach to spirituality.
So instead of just accepting dogma at face value,
Right.
they're engaging with these traditions on their own terms
Exactly.
and kind of extracting what resonates with them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about finding meaning and value in this, ancient wisdom without necessarily subscribing to every single doctrine. I mean, think about it in today's world.
Yeah, clear.
We're bombarded with information constantly.
Oh, yeah.
We're filtering, we're curating our experiences.
Right.
So why not apply that same approach to our spiritual beliefs?
Almost like creating a custom belief system.
Yeah.
Taking the parts that speak to you and leaving the rest behind.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah. And of course, this can be seen as both empowering
Okay.
and potentially problematic. Well, on the one hand, it gives individuals more agency, right? They're not bound by these rigid rules and interpretations. But on the other hand, it can lead to a somewhat superficial engagement with these complex traditions.
So it's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between personal interpretation and genuine respect for the source material.
Exactly. And that tension is something Peterson himself grapples with.
Mm-hmm.
He's not advocating for throwing out the Bible altogether.
Right.
Right? He's encouraging us to engage with it critically, thoughtfully, or to wrestle with its ideas
Yeah.
and extract what's meaningful for us.
Which makes me think about his emphasis on acting out your values that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just intellectually agree with something.
Right.
You have to actually embody it
Yeah, you have to live it.
in your daily life.
Absolutely. And that's where the rubber meets the road. You know, it's one thing to say, I believe in honesty, but it's another thing to actually be honest in your interactions with others.
Right.
Requires constant effort and self-reflection.
It's about making those values a part of your lived experience.
Yeah.
Do you think this focus on action is part of what makes Peterson so appealing to so many people?
I think so, yeah. He's not just offering these abstract philosophical ideas.
Right.
He's providing practical advice for living a more meaningful life, for navigating the complexities of the modern world.
Which, let's be honest, a lot of people are craving these days.
Yeah.
We're inundated with information, overwhelmed with choices,
Right.
easy to feel lost and directionless.
And that's where Peterson's emphasis on personal responsibility and purposeful action
Yeah.
can be so powerful.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of your life, finding your own meaning,
Right.
and making choices that align with your values.
So it's almost like a framework for self-improvement,
Yeah.
but grounded in these ancient wisdom traditions.
Exactly.
When you think about it, Peterson's work really transcends traditional categories.
It does.
He's blending philosophy, psychology, self-help, even theology
Yeah. Yeah, it's a unique blend.
in a way that's really unique.
And I think that's part of why he's resonated with such a diverse audience. He's not afraid to tackle these big questions, to challenge conventional thinking.
Right.
And he does it in a way that's both intellectually stimulating
Yeah.
and emotionally engaging.
And there's a certain vulnerability to him
Oh, yeah,
that makes him relatable.
definitely.
Even when he's talking about these really complex philosophical ideas.
Yeah.
Like, he's not afraid to admit that he doesn't have all the answers, that he's still wrestling with these questions himself.
Yeah.
And I think that humility is really refreshing.
It is. It reminds us that it's okay to doubt, to question, to be on a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
He's not preaching from a position of absolute authority.
Right.
He's inviting us to think alongside him, to explore these ideas together.
And that brings us back to this idea of personal interpretation,
Yeah,
right?
it's full circle.
It's not about blindly accepting what someone tells you. It's about engaging with these ideas, wrestling with them,
Yeah.
and ultimately forming your own conclusions.
Exactly. And that process, that struggle to find meaning and purpose,
Right.
that's something that resonates with a lot of people.
So we've talked about Peterson's unique approach to Christianity,
Yeah.
his emphasis on action, his ability to connect with this really diverse audience.
Yeah.
But what do you think is like the most important takeaway
Oh,
for our listener today? So we've talked about Peterson's unique approach to Christianity, his emphasis on action, his ability to connect with this really diverse audience.
right.
But what do you think is like the most important takeaway?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the key takeaway here is that engaging with these ideas, even challenging ones like religion,
Yeah.
it should be an active process.
Yeah.
Peterson really exemplifies that. He
Mhm.
doesn't shy away from like wrestling with these complex concepts,
Right.
even if he ultimately arrives at unconventional conclusions. It's like he's modeling a way to approach any belief system.
It's about taking ownership of your own intellectual and spiritual journey.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about blind acceptance or rejection. It's
Yeah.
about asking questions, exploring different perspectives,
Yeah.
and finding what resonates with you on a personal level.
And I think that's something we can all apply to our lives,
Absolutely.
regardless of our beliefs
Mhm.
or background.
Yeah, it's about being curious,
Mhm.
being willing to challenge your own assumptions,
Right.
and being open to new ways of thinking.
It's interesting how Peterson manages to connect these seemingly abstract ideas
Yeah,
to practical advice for living a better life.
right.
We've talked about personal responsibility,
Hmm.
but he also emphasizes things like, finding meaning in your work,
Right.
building strong relationships,
Yeah.
striving for self improvement.
It's a holistic approach. He's
Yeah.
drawing from these ancient wisdom traditions, but he's also grounding them in the realities of modern life. He's not just talking about ideas in a vacuum.
Okay.
He's showing how they can be applied to everyday challenges and aspirations.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave our listener with something to ponder.
All right.
We've explored Peterson's unique relationship with Christianity,
Yeah.
but what does his approach tell us about like the broader search for meaning in today's world?
That's a big one.
Is it possible to find meaning and purpose outside of these traditional religious structures?
Right.
Can we create our own personal frameworks for understanding these big questions?
It's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think Peterson's work offers a valuable starting point.
Mhm.
He encourages us to be active participants in our own meaning making,
Right.
to draw from a variety of sources,
Okay.
and to constantly challenge ourselves to grow and evolve.
It's about embracing that journey of self discovery,
Yeah.
even if it takes us down these unexpected paths.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe along the way, we'll uncover our own unique answers
Yeah.
to the questions that have been puzzling humanity for centuries.
That's the hope, right?
Keep exploring, keep questioning,
Keep learning.
and keep diving deep.